So we've talked about character, we've talked about plot, and we've talked about dialogue. This lecture covers theme, setting, and rhythm. And I think these roughly correspond to the last three of Aristotle's six elements of drama, what he called idea, spectacle, and song. Let's start with theme. What is theme? On an abstract level, it is what the play is about. The evils of war, the dangers of ambition, love conquers all, right? These are all themes. Um, or we might say the message. What is the central message about life or humanity that you are trying to portray through this play or through this film? Many plays and films have multiple themes, multiple central themes, so there's probably not only one. Sometimes theme is very obvious. In the play Macbeth, for example, the theme is uh, ambition can lead to ruin. If you are power hungry, you are going to cause destruction to yourself and to others. Other times, theme might be more subtle, but it's always going to be there because when we write, we are trying to say something. We want to communicate something. We have a message that we want to send in some way. Otherwise, we wouldn't be writing, right? How can we communicate theme? Through the character's actions, through the dialogue, through the character's arc or the character's journey, right? So Macbeth has a journey, a tragic arc, a journey from a place of relative power and honor to a place of ruin. That helps reinforce that theme of if you're too power hungry, you're going to end up destroyed. Another way to communicate theme is through symbolic imagery. Here's an example. We spoke before in the last lecture about the play Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo. And the central theme of this play has to do with the evils of war and the search for meaning in the face of destruction and death and suffering. And the central image in this play is the image of a garden. You can see it in the background here. Much of the action takes place in this zoo, and it's surrounded by this topiary garden. So we have these bushes that are carved into animals, but because Baghdad is under attack, they are ruined. So you can see the elephant here is kind of charred and ruined. And if you think about the central theme, the imagery of a garden, right? So what does a garden symbolize? What comes to mind? A garden can symbolize a sanctuary, a place where people go for rest and relaxation. And in this case, the sanctuary has been destroyed, right? So that's very symbolic. A garden has a religious meaning within the Judeo-Christian tradition. So there's the idea of the Garden of Eden, and it's this place of innocence, and then the innocence is destroyed. So again, we have this sense of suffering, of the destruction of innocence, of trying to make sense of why evil things happen. And I think the use of this garden imagery really, really reinforces that. In the play Hamlet, there is central imagery of disease and decay. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. What does that do? Well, it's fitting as Hamlet is trying to right a situation to right a wrong that he finds foul. His uncle has murdered his father. His uncle has married his mother. He finds this situation foul and unnatural. And so this imagery in the dialogue of disease and decay is very symbolically fitting and helps communicate that theme. Images also often make really strong titles. So if you have not yet decided on the title of the piece that you're working on. Think about, is there a central image that you could incorporate into that title? Cat on a hot tin roof. You can just, not only is that a vivid image, but it's a dynamic image. You can see the cat running across the roof, trying to get off, but finding itself unable to escape, and that effectively communicates some of the themes of that play. Or a raisin in the sun, another great image that's vivid and dynamic and memorable. Glass menagerie. Avoid titles that are vague, because those tend to be not as memorable. If you can have a central image in your title, it tends to stick in people's minds a little bit more. Related to imagery and theme is the topic of setting. Setting is important. And for a film, right, setting is really central because the audience is going to be able to see where the action takes place. With a play, we sometimes don't think as much about setting, but I would argue that setting is just as important for a play as it is for a film. And it's perhaps more important for a play because you can't rely on having detailed background. It's even more important to put your setting into your dialogue. Incorporate your setting into your dialogue. Why do that? Well, it helps the audience to feel engaged in the play. It helps them feel that they are in the world of the play, so it helps it come to life. And then setting can also impact things like the mood of the play, the themes of the play, the setting of a garden here, right? It can reinforce theme, and setting can impact plot and character. I want to share an example here. This is from the opening stage directions of a play by Katori Hall called Hurt Village. And the way that she describes the setting here is so vivid and so memorable. This is only in the stage directions, so no actor is reading this, but it establishes a feeling, a sense of the setting that set designers, props designers are going to be able to work with. Dusk. Somewhere the sky is falling into the ground. Bits and pieces of magenta, peach and coral hues make the broken bits of beer bottles and crack vials glow with a stardust twinkle. No grass, no one. Dust rolls across this beautiful broken land like wisps of cotton candy blowing in the country wind. Except cotton candy does not exist in this modern-day wasteland. Nothing even remotely related to sweetness exists here. Notice how beautiful, how vivid that is, how lyrical. It makes the setting almost like another character. So describing your setting in stage directions is one way to give a sense of where we are. But another way is to, again, incorporate it into the dialogue that your characters say. To use an ancient example, this is from the play Agamemnon by Aeschylus. And what's happened here is Cassandra, who is a captive of war, has been brought to the home of Agamemnon, who is the king who captured her. And she's a prophetess. She can see the future. So she knows that as soon as she goes into that house, she's going to be murdered. She's going to be stabbed to death by Agamemnon's jealous wife. Nobody believes her, but she sees this coming. So notice how she describes not only what she's feeling, but she describes what she's smelling on the threshold of this house. The chorus asks, "What terror whirls you backward from the door?" She says, "Foul, foul." What foulness then, unless some horror in the mind? Again, they don't believe her. That room within reeks with blood like a slaughterhouse. What then? Only these victims butchered at the hearth. There is a breath about it like an open grave. I love how The playwright incorporated smell here, often when we're describing the way our surroundings, uh, and we think of sensory details, we think primarily of sight. But remember that we have five senses, right? We have sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. And notice how much that contributes to these lines. She could have just said, I feel, I have a bad feeling about going into this house. I'm feeling a sense of dread. But instead, very, very vivid. This room reeks with blood like a slaughterhouse. There's a breath about it like an open grave. It really brings that setting to life in the minds of the audience. Another interesting feature of this play is that the main setting is the doorway. So the doorway is the central feature of the set of this play. And if you think symbolically about a doorway, what does a doorway represent? Transition, right? Passage. And there's a number of types of transition going on in this play. Transition from war to peace. Transition from life to death. Transition from for Cassandra from freedom to being a captive. So that central image of the doorway helps to reinforce theme. Time for a mini writing exercise. What I'd like you to do is picture the setting of the scene that you're working on for this class. If there are multiple settings, choose one. Maybe choose the one where the action primarily takes place. Okay. Describe that setting using all five of your senses. It's probably going to be fairly easy for sight, maybe for sound. For touch, smell, and taste, it might be a little bit more of a challenge. Okay. So give yourself about, I would say 10 minutes here, pause the video, and you can write it out as a narrative. You can do a list, but try to get something vivid and specific down for each of these senses. And finally, we have rhythm. This is what Aristotle referred to as song. And at the time in ancient Greece, all plays did literally include song. Now, unless you were dealing with a musical, you may not have actual songs in your play or film. But what are some ways that you can still include that element of rhythm? One is sound effects. You're going to have plenty of sound going on in the background with a film. With a play, there tend to be fewer sound effects, and they tend to be very, very deliberate. So think hard if you're going to put a sound effect into your play. Make sure that it is there for a very meaningful purpose. And in some plays, sound effects are very, very central. In the play Night Mother, there is a gunshot at the end. The sound of a gunshot that is very, very central to that play. Another play that uses sound in a way that I think is very effective is the play Eurydice by Sarah Ruhl. I'd like to share a little excerpt here of the stage directions. And this is from Act 2 of the play, when the central character, Eurydice, has died and finds herself entering the underworld. Notice how central sound is to these stage directions. The sound of an elevator ding. An elevator door opens. Inside the elevator, it is raining. Eurydice gets rained on inside the elevator. She carries a suitcase and an umbrella. She is dressed in the kind of 1930s suit that women wore when they eloped. She looks bewildered. The sound of an elevator ding. There's the sound again. Eurydice steps out of the elevator. The elevator door closes. She walks toward the audience and opens her mouth, trying to speak. There is a great humming noise. So we have the elevator ding twice. We have this humming noise when she opens her mouth. There it comes again. and she's not able to speak. And then the Stones, which are a chorus, who often speak in unison, comment on this. Eurydice wants to speak to you, but she can't speak your language anymore. She talks in the language of dead people now. And throughout the play, sound remains relevant. So there are dripping sounds in the background in the underworld. And what I think sound does so well in this play is it helps to communicate theme and to tie this into the story that it's based on, which is the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Who was Orpheus? He was a great musician. So while we don't have Orpheus singing in this play, we do have this sound as an important characteristic throughout the play. Another way to incorporate rhythm is actual music, right? So the background of a film will usually have a musical soundtrack, right? So you can use music to help communicate mood. For example, you can have more tense music when the scene is tense or frightening. You can have happy music when the scene is happy. In a way, this takes the place of the chorus in Greek drama, and the chorus would have the function of helping to communicate mood. They would sing happy, upbeat songs when the audience was meant to feel happy. They would sing slower, sad songs when the audience was meant to feel sad. So it's kind of our modern version of that. And sometimes a play will have music in the background. It's less common because to incorporate that into a play tends to need a little bit more in terms of the technical accompaniments for the play. But you can also think about having incidental songs. You know, maybe your characters are humming. Maybe your character sings a few bars of a song at a place that helps to communicate the mood or theme. And then finally, think about rhythm in dialogue, rhythm in speech. This is another way that we can help to create that sense of song, even if we don't have actual music for song. One of the ways we can create rhythm in dialogue is through repetition. Now, often we're taught as writers to avoid repetition. And we do want to avoid it if it sounds clunky or if it slows things down. However, there is a way to use repetition that creates rhythm and can be very powerful and very lyrical. This is a little excerpt from Oscar Wilde's play Salome. This is a very, very poetic, very lyrical play. So as I read this, hear the repetition and how that repetition creates a sense of rhythm. Thy body was a column of ivory set on a silver socket. It was a garden full of doves and of silver lilies. It was a tower of silver decked with shields of ivory. There was nothing in the world so white as thy body. There was nothing in the world so black as thy hair. In the whole world there was nothing so red as thy mouth. So we have that repetition. Thy body was this, it was this, it was this. It was in the whole world there was nothing as blank, right? This repetition of phrases. We also see some alliteration here, right? The S sound set on a silver socket. That can help to create a sense of rhythm. I have a handout in the handout section of this week's module that goes into a little bit more depth about how you can use sound to create a sense of rhythm and to enhance the way a character speaks. I think there's a lot that we can learn from poets about this. Even if your dialogue is not particularly poetic, maybe you're writing a play that's more based in realism, I think you can still use some of these principles. I assigned you for this week an excerpt of the opening of a play called Lydia by Octavio Solis. And I chose this play for a couple of reasons. I think it's a great example of very lyrical and poetic language that uses repetition in a way that creates a strong sense of rhythm. I also think this is a play that uses dialogue in a unique way to create a sense of contrast and irony. The central character, Cece, is a teenage girl. She has been in a car accident, which has left her paralyzed and unable to communicate. So we can see her here. She's lying on stage. She has a hard time communicating with her family members. However, she can communicate with us, the audience. And when she's speaking to us, she doesn't have any difficulty. She doesn't have any impairment. She speaks in these beautiful poetic sorts of dialogue that so I think that contrast is very, very interesting between the way that we see her communicate and express her thoughts and ideas, and the way that the other characters in the play see her communicate. So as you read that, um, take note both of the sense of rhythm in the dialogue and the way that that dialogue is used. So the takeaway, think about ways that you can incorporate theme, setting, and rhythm into your own script. These are elements that we sometimes don't give a lot of thought to. We tend to think about plot, character, and dialogue, and for good reason. Those are the central, most important features of dramatic writing. However, we can use theme, we can use setting, we can use rhythm to enhance those features and to bring that much more life to our writing. So that's it for the lectures for this week. Next week, we will workshop your writing, and we will also talk a bit about the profession of playwriting as well as screenwriting. I'll see you then.